Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening and how are you doing today? How's your podcast coming along? I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out every single thing you might want to know about that show on the little website, which I created by hand, all by myself. Check that out. Yeah, I can build websites too, kinda, at chrisandchristineshow.com. There's a link to it into the website or into the show notes of this episode today. But here on Podtastic Audio, I want to say thank you. Yes, I truly do mean thank you so much for being here this week. I do this show for you, and every single week I look at my downloads. Thanks to Libsyn, they actually show you weekly stats, or should I say episode stats. So it shows how each episode did from week to week to episode, and I can see you listening. I thank you. I can see you right there. Yeah, there you are. Yes, you're one of the numbers. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. And the numbers really have been consistent for the most part. They've been pretty much around the same number from week to week. So I know some people always brag about their numbers. Oh, I got 60,000, plays or listens or whatever it is. Or it may be just one or two episodes that really skyrocketed due to maybe a big guest or a popular episode. Sometimes it happens. You'll have nobody listening, all your episodes. And then you'll see just the one that'll skyrocket. And you're like, oh, wow, look at me now. Now I have a bunch of downloads and I'm super popular. Actually, that one episode is the one that's actually popular. So you really want to look at your downloads. You want to look at what happens episode to episode, week to week. And those numbers should somewhat stay around the same. Maybe off by a few here and there. And that's what mine's been doing. And I want to say thank you for listening. I really, truly appreciate it. So here on Podtastic Audio, we're going to answer one of life's greatest mysteries. And that is, when it comes to podcasting, or I would say even content creating in general, are you a content creator? Or perhaps maybe you're just a content commenter. You see, there is a difference, and we're going to go over it on this episode. But before we get into all that fun stuff, I want to say is that you can podcast however you like. However you're doing your show, whether you're enjoying doing a particular topic or niche or talking about the weather, or maybe even got your paint drawing podcast out there and it's super popular with you and your buddies. I don't know. But the point is this: you have fun and you enjoy doing whatever it is you're doing. And you don't let me or anybody else tell you exactly how you need to podcast with your own show. It's your podcast. You do it however you like to do it and just have fun. That's the most important thing, I would say. If you're not having fun doing your podcast, then maybe you should pick up a different hobby. Maybe pick up something else. Do knitting, or maybe do whatever it is that floats your fancy, and just enjoy what you're doing. Because if you're not having any fun doing your podcast, then what's the point? It's just misery, really. So just the other day, it got me thinking is that when you edit your podcast, now editing is up to debate, whether you want to edit your show or not edit your show. It's really up to you. Or how you edit your show. It's really up to you. But I had a podcaster just reach out to me the other day, and he was complaining about having to edit a guest interview he did, because he does a lot of guest interviews. And when you have a guest come on your show, you really have no idea what they're going to talk about. You kind of have an idea what exactly the kind of content they're going to talk about, but you really don't know what they sound like, and you really don't know what kind of gear they have. We always try to ask them, and before we get them on the show, what kind of a gear are you using? Are you using a phone, equipment, a laptop, a microphone? Hopefully, you just hope that they all have really good gear, or at least decent gear. But if they do not have decent gear, you always can modify that or tweak it later in post-production. It was funny, just over the weekend, Christine and I did an interview with a guest, and we tried getting them online, and they said they had a computer. When we sent over our prep sheet, they said, what kind of gear you have? And they said a computer. Okay, great. So we go send them a clean feed link, get them all logged in. They had a problem connecting and they couldn't figure it out and all this stuff. We asked them, what are you using? Oh, I just have my phone. I just have my iPhone. That's all I got. And I'm like, well, where are you? And they were like in the sticks. They weren't even around. Like, I mean, internet was very spotty for the most part where they were at. So I'm like trying to get them all figured out, and we're going through different techniques. And every minute we think we got them connected, we start talking and we ask them a question and they just drop off. They're not even there. And they do come in and they get cut out and cut in. And I'm like, you know what? I've got this Rodecaster Pro 2, and I know it's got a Bluetooth phone feature right on the thing. So I said, here, I have an idea. Here's what we'll do. I have your phone number. So I'm going to call you from my cell phone, and we're going to do this whole interview via a telephone, just like the good old days back in the radio, and then to call in, a caller would call into the station. We're going to do it the exact same way. Christine and I, because the Rodecaster, we go multiple channels. So with the Rodecaster, yeah, you can have people on microphone, up to 4 microphones running in the same room here. Plus, you can have somebody on the phone and everybody hears everybody, and it sounds great. It already has a built-in mix minus where you got to switch on the mix minus mode in the Rodecaster. I had to do that. But once you get that figured out, and it saves everybody on their own individual audio track. So we did that, and I saved it all to the Rodecaster's memory card. Now, I had a problem was at the very end of the interview, I like to stop the recording and then kind of go over logistics with the guest and when this is coming out, and thank you for coming on, and all the just the little basic behind the scenes stuff that really does not have to go into the interview itself, just behind the scenes stuff. So I was trying to do that, and I pressed stop on the recording on the Rodecaster, but I could not press stop. I was hitting the button and it was still recording. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I can't stop this recording. What is going to happen if I can't stop this thing from shutting down? And Christine's like, well, maybe you have to end the phone call for it to stop. So we're talking to the guest and we're kind of wrapping things up. But I said, well, I'll hang the phone call up after we're done with her. And then once I did that, I don't know what happened, but it let me press stop on the recording after I hung up the phone call, which is kind of weird. So this is our very first time actually recording a guest through an actual just cell phone telephone, recording it that way with a phone number, like the old fashioned way with the Rodecaster. It can be done. It's not too bad to do. Everything gets saved on its own audio file and a WAV file for the most part, even though the actual audio signal itself, the actual sound quality itself through the telephone is really compressed. It's a very, very low bit rate because it's just for cell phones and for telephone use, really. So that's why when you hear somebody come in on a phone call versus like on the radio, or maybe, like a radio station of a caller called in, their audio never sounds as good as a station audio, even if it's the same DJ that may actually leave the studio to do a call in from like a remote spot. They'll call in. It sounds kind of weird, right? That's because it's done through a telephone. It's never the greatest. So I took her audio and I ran it through, of course, the new Adobe Enhance. I ran it through that, and then I ran it through, of course, Levelator, and I dropped it all into Audacity, and playing with all the real-time effects. I really used a lot of different effects on her to make her sound great. Took it all the clip sounds. There was some clippy sounds because it's telephone, that kind of thing, but I did my best. The episode should come out. Should be the next episode, the very next episode we're going to do, I think, is going to be her interview. But, I mean, like I said, you always can fall to good old faithful, which is the telephone to actually make a recording. Now, it's not the best audio in the world, but you really have to think about, make it sound listenable, make it sound to where it's not super distracting, like it's really bad, where you sound great and the guest sounds like a tin can from 8 miles away, and make it sound somewhat enjoyable, somewhat level, somewhat at the same sound quality. I guess you can't be the exact same sound quality, but at least make it enjoyable and listenable. Really, that's what you're trying to get, is listenable. And the content itself of the message that they say is really what's going to have to hold the episode together, because the audio quality really isn't going to. So the content really has to be the glue for that episode. So I had another podcaster reach out the other day, and he was complaining about having a guest that he had to cut out all the ums of the interview. And he was stressed out because he said there was so many different ums that the guest had when he was editing the interview he was doing. So when I do podcast editing for, say, this show, or maybe for like, especially interviews for the most part, really. We have multiple voices all on the same channel, all on the same show for the most part. Obviously, first thing you got to do is try to get everybody on their own individual audio tracks. Once you have everybody on their own separate audio tracks, you, the guests, multiple guests, whoever you have, try to get everybody on their own individual audio tracks if you can, if that's even possible. Hopefully it is. But once you get that dialed in, I try to really focus on getting the best sounding audio quality first. Now, this is kind of like when I edit, kind of goes into a 2-part section, and each part kind of takes about the same amount of time to do it. So like I said, the first part really is fine-tuning the audio itself to make it sound the best I possibly can. That means taking out any bumps, taking out any like, not ums, but I'm talking taking out any kind of like noises that really shouldn't be there. If there's scratchy sound. I hear a lot of these like bumping things sound. I mean, I've done it myself. I caught myself on the last interview I just did. I caught myself bumping the microphone and Christine bumping the mic. It's slight little bumps. You don't even think about, really. They get picked up on the microphone. Like, you got to take out those. And you can see them when you're in there, especially when you're doing separate audio tracks. And I go in there and use the real-time effects, and I try to really fine-tune all of the audio, make it sound spectacular. Once I got everything dialed in, it sounds great. Everything sounds amazing. Then the second part of editing is chopping things out and what to chop out and how much to chop out. And do you chop out every Do you leave some in? Do you chop out all the gaps? I like to chop out some of the gaps, but you want to make it sound natural. You can go too much in this whole chopping situation. You start chopping things out left and right. It can get too quick and it can sound very robotic. And the interview or the show itself can sound a bit unnatural. So when the podcaster reached out to me, he was complaining about all the guest ums he had, and he was going through it and said it was taking him forever to edit out all the ums of the podcast from his guest. He was complaining about the whole thing. And I said, well, depends on how many ums you have, because if it's a lot, like if the guest says before they say every word, every sentence they say leads with an and then maybe an in the middle. So you think about a 3-line sentence, if they drop 4 ums in between that 4-line sentence, that's a lot, and if it's that many, truly is that many in your show, there's really a few options you have at this point. Now, what he chose to do was sit there by hand and go through each one and spend hours and hours literally combing through the audio to really fine tune and get rid of every single that he sees in the audio wave file. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of time. And I only can dedicate maybe an hour at the most or half an hour here and there to really work on editing that part of the audio interview. So I said, these are your options, really. If it's that many and you don't have time to take them all out, you got to get Descript. Go to Descript. I think it's Descript.com or something like that. And you go and get Descript. I know you got to pay for it. But what it does is it transcribes the podcast audio into actual script. So, hence the word Descript. I guess that's where they got it from. And it'll go through there and figure out where all the are at in the audio. And with a click of a button, click, 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 it will remove all of those. But be careful, because when you do that, it can sound a little abrupt. It can sound a little too quick pace. Some of the edits aren't really made with a fine knife. They're made with a hacksaw. Really. It's a little rough sometimes. So you have to be careful with some of those edits on there. Now, if it really was like a million ums in the episode, then I say go ahead and do it, because it's either that, or you can leave them all in, or you can stress yourself out and be up all night taking care of all of them. So I said to him, those are really your options, is run it through the script. Don't worry about it and leave them in, or, you can go and keep doing what you're doing. And he said to me, which kind of threw me off, he says, I have a 0 tolerance for ums. It's a 0 tolerance on ums in my show. To that, I'm like, what the hell? What does that even mean? I mean, I'm a jokester, so I write back, I say, hey, why don't you tell your guest to stick to the script. And I know you want your guests to sound great. You want them to sound important. You want them to sound smart because hopefully they are smart. And you want to sound smart too, so maybe take out some of your ums and stuff too. But you got to think about, in normal conversation, ums and pauses are just part of the game. That's how we all talk. It's natural. So I say, well, suit yourself, man. Do it however you want to do it. It's your show. Go right ahead. But it doesn't sound natural if you cut out every single and have a quote unquote zero policy. Because nobody talks that way. Nobody is like that. I try to edit my shows for a natural sound, not just natural, like, hey, what's up? We're just going to hang out and I don't know what we're talking about and we're bored and blah, blah, blah. No, not like that. I'm saying like actually sounding like we're all hanging out in the same room, having a conversation, the way normal conversations go. And maybe it just takes practice. Maybe the more practice you have talking, the more practice you have doing a podcast, the more practice you have interviewing people, maybe the more natural it becomes and the easier it becomes to have a podcast interview. So I try to edit my episodes to make them sound natural. I mean, obviously good, but naturally good. I guess that's the term I'm going for. Is naturally good is the goal that I try to aim for when I create a podcast interview or a podcast episode, I should say. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the differences between whether or not you are a content creator or are you a content commenter. Now, what really is the difference? Well, if you are a content creator, you are physically creating something from scratch for your audience to listen to or learn or educate. Like you created the content and you are telling the listener the content and you are delivering value, I would hope. Hopefully you deliver value, something that you drafted, something that you created, something that you thought up, and something that you had. I mean, maybe it got sparked from an idea, from a topic or something like that, but it's your own personal story and it's your own personal thoughts going into the creation of what you're doing. You see, an author who wrote a book, that would be a creator. He created something. He created the book. Or maybe you're a filmmaker and you actually created a movie, whether it's short film, YouTube movie, or a real movie itself. You created this thing out of nothing. I mean, I know you had a script and you had things that were created by other people. It was all created and you created this entire thing to share with everybody. Like creating a podcast episode from scratch, talking about things from scratch. You building this whole thing out of nothing. And here you are. Obviously, there's a topic or something that's grounded that your show really has its own little niche. I would hope it does. But then you go into what I like to call content commenters. Now, the content commenters are basically anybody that watches something that somebody else did, does a show about the thing somebody else did. They comment on the other person's creation. So they're like a content commenters. Now, I know there's a lot of shows that do the latter half. They aren't really creating anything. They are actually commenting on other people's work, whether it be a movie, whether it be sports, whether it be you name it and whatever. I think the problem is that some people that are content commenters think they're content creators. Yeah, not really, but you really can podcast however you want to. It's your show. Do it however you want. But the pure definition really is that you are actually commenting on somebody else's craft, somebody else's work. Now, it's a little easier to be a content commenter than it is to be a content creator. It's easier to talk about something somebody else did than actually do that same thing yourself. You see, it's like sports. You know, every football season here in America, the NFL, right? It's popular. It's the biggest sport in the country. It's trying to be the biggest sport in the world, but that goes to soccer or / football, however you like to say it. And, you know, if you watch that sport, every game, there's going to be a bunch of people that obviously are way overweight, shoving nachos in their face, and they're sitting on their couch, and they're yelling at the screen saying, you should have done that. Why ain't you doing this? Or why'd you throw the ball like that? Or why'd you miss that play? Why'd you do that? They're commenting, of course. Yet, do you think they actually can get out there in the field and do it? Hell no. They couldn't run 40 yards. They couldn't run 4 feet, most of them, you know? So those would be commenters. They're not actually doing the said thing, which is fine too. Everybody has an audience, but just remember that without the content creators themselves, the content commenters wouldn't even exist because they have nothing to really comment on if the creators didn't create the one said thing. So thank a content creator today. Hey, thanks again for listening. I am also on social media. Yeah, check that out. You can find me on Twitter on Podtastic A. And if you go over to the gram, that is the Instagram, you can find me under Podtastic Audio. Very simple. Give me a follow, give me a like, and yeah. So I will catch you on the next episode.